December 19th, 2003. Kobe Bryant is standing in a courtroom in Eagle, Colorado, listening to lawyers argue about a case that could end his career and his freedom in the same breath. That afternoon, he boards a private plane bound for Los Angeles. He doesn't have time to change his mindset on the flight or barely have time to change his clothes. Kobe walks into the Staples Center with 4 minutes already gone in the first quarter, still carrying whatever was said in the courtroom a few hours earlier. He scores 13 points all night. Not a huge number for him, but the final two land from 21 feet right at the buzzer, and the Lakers beat the Nuggets 101-99. Same day, same man, courtroom in the morning, hero at the buzzer by night. Nobody in that building could explain it. Not his coach, not his teammates, not the reporters waiting in the tunnel with more questions about Colorado than actual basketball. How do you compartmentalize a courtroom and a game winner in the same 24 hours and still make the shot? This video is the explanation, and it starts with the decision Kobe Bryant made around this exact period of his life, a decision to stop being one person and start being two. Kobe Bryant and the Black Mamba are not the same person. It might sound like marketing, but it's closer to survival. By late 2003, Kobe was the most publicly scrutinized athlete in the country, and not for anything he did on the basketball court. The case of Colorado was still active. His name sat in headlines and had nothing to do with points or rings. Around this period, while watching Kill Bill, Kobe found a name for a decision he had already started making without a name for it. He needed a version of himself the outside noise could not reach. Black Mamba, he later explained, was trained to strike, engineered to compete, built to survive contact. Kobe Bryant was a person with a family, a reputation, and a life falling apart in public. But the Black Mamba did not carry any of that onto the basketball court. This also was a tactic used by hip-hop artists as well. Eminem built Slim Shady for the same reason, a mask loud enough to say things that Marshall Mathers alone could not survive saying. And Jay-Z became Hove, a persona sturdy enough to carry the weight of a kid from Marcy Projects that was never supposed to escape. The move is always the same. When the world starts watching closely, you build something the world can watch instead. Kobe engineered a second self in 2003 using the same survival tools artists reach for when their world gets too close, and he did it for the same reason they do, to keep functioning while the real person underneath tries to survive. But building a second self to face the outside world creates a different problem entirely, like what happens to the people standing closest to you when you're constantly switching in between the two. Ask almost any of Kobe Bryant's teammates what he was like off the court in the earlier years especially, and you will get some version of the same answer. He was brilliant, relentless, but hard to get close to. The obsession that made him great in public made him difficult to reach in private. Shaquille O'Neal, his co-star for the 3 championships, spent years describing the relationship that was more of a rivalry than a partnership. Teammates on later Olympic teams and regular rosters would describe getting phone calls before sunrise, Kobe already awake, already in the gym, wondering out loud why everyone else was still asleep. He treated an empty gym at dawn the way most players treat a playoff game, with full focus and no apology for the entire hour. This is admirable when you're watching the highlight reel, but it is a much harder thing to live next to. People close to him have said in interviews over the years that the same switch he could flip on command for Black Mamba did not always flip back off. The competitor did not always know how to leave the arena. The isolation and greatness came from the same decision, told from 2 different rooms. One room had cameras in it, the other did not. If this pattern sounds familiar, that is because you have seen it before, just never applied it to a basketball court. Every generation produces a handful of people who get famous enough that they stop being allowed to just be a person. Hip-hop figured out the survival mechanism decades before Kobe needed it. Eminem did not become one of the best-selling artists alive as Marshall Mathers, a kid from a trailer outside Detroit carrying more than most adults process in a lifetime. He became Slim Shady first, a character loud enough and unbothered enough to say the unsayable so Marshall could keep functioning behind him. Jay-Z did the same thing in reverse. Sean Carter grew up around real danger in Brooklyn, and Hope became the version of him confident enough to walk into boardrooms that were never built for someone from Marcy Projects. Kobe grew up close to this exact move, partly in Italy and partly in Philadelphia, raised on the same music that was busy inventing this survival technique in real time. When his own crisis hit in 2003, he reached for a tool he already understood because he had already listened to people build it his whole life. Black Mamba wasn't a basketball gimmick borrowed from a Tarantino movie. It was a hip-hop instinct applied to a sport that had never seen anyone use it quite this deliberately before. 2003 through 2005 were by most measures the worst years of Kobe Bryant's adult life. The case in Colorado dragged through 2004 before charges were dropped, Shaq was traded away from the Los Angeles Lakers the same summer, endorsements disappeared, the roster around him fell apart, and for a stretch, so did his public reputation. Then, on January 22, 2006, against the Toronto Raptors, Kobe Bryant scored 81 points in a single game. Only one man in NBA history has ever scored more. He did not build that performance out of nowhere. He rebuilt his entire game, his conditioning, his shot selection, and from a low point, almost nobody survives with a career intact. The 81-point game happened because of 2 years that became before it. Black Mamba was not a mood he summoned just for one big night. It was discipline he spent 2 full years reconstructing from the worst version of himself in private before anyone in public was ready to forgive him. This is the proof skeptics ask for, a stat line that only makes sense once you understand what he had built to survive the years before it. But every tool built to survive something eventually asks to be put down. Kobe's turn came later than most expected. Most tributes skip this part. The same obsession that built Black Mamba also strained almost everything around Kobe for years. His marriage went through a public separation before reconciling, and his closest basketball partnership ended in a rivalry that outlasted both their careers. Greatness at that level is rarely free, and Kobe never pretended it was. What changes the story is what he did with that knowledge near the end. In his final seasons, Kobe talked openly about wanting Black Mamba to become something bigger than himself, a mentality that most people can pick up and carry rather than a mask that he was only allowed to wear. He spent his retirement writing, coaching his daughter's basketball team, mentoring young players across multiple sports, teaching the same relentlessness that once isolated him, this time on purpose and this time in the open. By the end, Kobe handed a persona that saved him in 2003 to everyone willing to carry the same weight. Mamba mentality outlived the Black Mamba the competitor because Kobe finally let the two selves he had spent a career keeping separate work toward the same thing. Every person who becomes great enough to be watched by millions eventually faces the same choices Kobe faced in that Colorado courtroom. Let the noise define you or build something strong enough to walk through it. Kobe built the Black Mamba the same way Eminem built Slim Shady and Jay-Z built Hove. Out of necessity, not vanity. The tragedy and triumph of that choice are in fact the same, looked at from 2 different angles. It kept him standing when the world wanted him gone, and it cost him years of being fully present with the people who loved just Kobe, not the competitor he built to protect him. He scored 13 points on the day he should have ended his career, and the only 2 that anyone remembers is the ones from 21 feet at the buzzer. It was a man proving to himself first and everyone else second that he had built something strong enough to survive being watched. Kobe forced people to accept a new nickname just to explain what he was doing on the court. A few years later, one point guard forced the entire analytics community to rebuild an actual formula. During the 2016-17 season, Russell Westbrook was so statistically relentless that Basketball Reference's own box plus minus system broke trying to measure him and had to be built from the ground up because of it. In the next video, we get into that exact season and how one man's numbers became too extreme for the stat sheet built to explain him.